We will present a bold set of reforms aimed at helping businesses create jobs.
We are facing a very challenging place with our most vulnerable children.
The current budget proposal is devastating to the city of Milwaukee. It impacts every area of life and every area of well-being that people in this community are engaged in.
The Year in Review.
Next on Black Nouveau.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of Black Nouveau. I'm Milton, Dockery.
And I'm Faithe. We're glad you could join us. On this episode, we'll look back at some of the big stories of 2011 and ahead to the major issues of 2012.
We'll remember the Milwaukee Rep's production of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and discuss diabetes with actor Anthony Anderson.
But first, he's no longer the artist in residence at the Pfister Hotel, but Reginald Baylor is still one of Milwaukee's premier artists. Our Lady Collins did this profile when he became artist in residence.
The pop era, very graphic, sort of cartoony. Cartoon in the sense that I outline almost subjects in a black line. That creates sort of an animated quality. And the fact that I don't blend colors and they're unique and decipherable within themselves are the graphic aspects of it. And especially today, as art is moving into even more graphic realm because the new tool is the computer, it seems that my work is sort of commentary to that idea.
Meet native Milwaukeean Reginald Baylor, whose description of himself is
43-year-old man, young man from Milwaukee, father, artist.
Art for Baylor, a UW Oshkosh graduate, started back in the 4th grade with his attention to detail.
My work seemed to be somewhat separate than the rest of my classmates as far as details and the amount of time and energy that I would put towards it, even with your regular school projects. Even in geometry class, when you're doing rectangles, squares, and circles, well, mine, I would make sure that they were perfect. That attention to detail visually was just something I just couldn't get out of my head.
Even though his art was nurtured, life took over, and he strayed away from his art. But he said going off course made him stay on course.
Family had a lot to do with it, responsibility to my wife and children. I had to set that to the side, even though it was a dream of mine, living the dream, as they say. Sometimes reality takes precedence over the dream. But then being away from it then also made me realize that how much need I have for just being creative any way possible. And so it came back itself. Despite what I was doing, it showed its head.
What was it like going from, I want to say, the everyday kind of work kind of job going into your dream job?
Well, what worked out well for me was being an independent truck driver. My own businessman, so therefore I could determine when I could go and when I couldn't. So it was a balance of financial responsibilities and then my creative responsibilities. So that helped me. I don't think there would have been any other career that would have worked as well as it has for me to get me to this point.
And so how did you get back into the dream?
Just doing it.
Putting in the time and effort brought about his self-portrait entitled Leap of Faith.
At a stage in my life where I needed to take a leap from my career as a truck driver to being a full-time artist and with a family. It was a very, very scary thing. It wasn't just my wishes that I was imposing this on, but it was family and children and economics, so on and so forth. So approaching that idea of leaping, coming from somewhere and obviously hopefully going somewhere and making that journey.
This journey, this leap of faith, led Baylor to Milwaukee's Pfister Hotel, where he is the first artist in residence.
Pfister has immense art collection, Victorian art collection. There's over 70 something works of art here. What I decided to do here for the next year is to just sort of intervene, I would say, to be a conduit to what is contemporary and some of the values I find in aesthetic beauty as an artist, and sort of dovetail what the Pfister has. The Pfister has always had a history of being involved in the arts here in Milwaukee for many, many years. I mean, the collection is a perfect example itself.
And he was inspired by one of the pieces in the Pfister collection.
When I was looking for inspiration, I decided to why not work with the first piece of art that was next to me. And right down the hallway, that painting was there. And the composition was interesting. It's called The Captive. And so I decided to pretty much work from that concept. All my work, pretty much, when it's figurative, it's small vignettes of ideas that might not all coexist when I take the photograph. So these are a collage of things that are here at the Pfister. The figures that are in this piece are from a competitive ballroom composition that they have here every year. I asked those two dancers to pose in the same position in which that painting. I was inspired by The Captive, and then I built from there. I'm fascinated with imagery and how many times the average person is fed an image a day. It's 15 times more images we see, basically because we carry around devices that give us images, whether it's the internet or the television. We're a very visual culture, and that's only going to grow. It's not going to get less. So when I first started thinking about that, little sound bites of information is what I'm interested in. I love when people come to my painting and get it, and then can be able to walk away and then ask them if they can retain what they saw in 5 seconds. And that's not a ploy, and I'm not trying to deceive anyone, but I think sort of this idea of instant gratification is an artistic expression itself. So I'm just trying to communicate to people, even though they might not be able to translate what I'm saying.
Pain, fear, hope, salvation, and waking up in the morning is Reginald Baylor's motivation.
I just believe it to be my purpose. This is what I'm to do, and that's, I've never thought otherwise. I've always had that feeling that art was going to always be an essential part of my life, and the struggle in making myself do it every day when you really have no concrete vision of what that future might bring has actually made my work better.
You may remember Anthony Anderson from films like Barbershop or Hustle and Flow, or more recently on TV in Law and Order. The actor and comedian has been in over 20 films and numerous TV shows. He is now one of the faces for the Lilly USA Fearless African Americans Connected and Empowered Diabetes Initiative. He joins us now on Black Nouveau. Welcome to Black Nouveau, Anthony. Anthony, you've had a diverse career as a performer. How early did you know you wanted to be on stage or in front of the camera?
You know what, I've only wanted to be 3 things in life. I wanted to play for the Dallas Cowboys, I wanted to be a lawyer, and I wanted to be an actor. And at the age of 9, I realized that if I became an actor, I could become all 3 of those things and whatever else I wanted to become in life. My mother was doing a production of A Raisin in the Sun at Compton Community College, and I just happened to be sitting in the back of the theater playing with my younger brothers. And I looked up on stage and saw her rehearsing, and at that moment, I said, that's what I'm going to do with the rest of my life, and here I am.
And how did you prepare for a career as a performer? You know, at the age of 9, having that desire, but you know, you had to do some things to prepare for that.
Yeah, well, anything that required me being in front of a live audience, you know, a spelling bee, oratory, you know, reading poetry, reading aloud in class, being a part of school productions, you know, at the early ages, that's what I did. I was also accepted into the high school for the performing arts in Los Angeles as a theater major. then accepted to Howard University in their fine arts program as a theater major. So, you know, I've been training at this since I was 9 years old, and that's been the background of my training.
And now you are a spokesperson for diabetes.
Yes, I am.
And I understand
You
that
know,
you were diagnosed about 7 years ago with type 2 diabetes. Tell us about that.
Yeah, a little longer than that. You know, 8 years ago, I was diagnosed as a type 2 diabetic. You know, subsequently, my father was diagnosed and lost his battle due to complications of diabetes. And a couple of years ago, my mother was diagnosed as a type 2 diabetic. So, you know, this is a passion of mine. It's near and dear to my heart because of how it's affected me and my family. So I sought out Eli Lilly and their FACE initiative and asked them if I could be a part of this to help bring awareness and help educate you know, the African American community on this disease that, you know, that's crippling us. You know, every 50% or every child born today has a 50% chance of being diagnosed as a type 2 diabetic by the age of 20. You know, and that's a staggering number. And a quarter of the people who are diagnosed with diabetes or who have diabetes don't even know that they have the disease. So this initiative that we have here is about managing diabetes. It's also encouraging people to go to the hospital to get screened to see where they are and if they fall into that category, so you know they can make the necessary lifestyle changes to live with this disease and not die from it.
What do you mean by managing the disease, Anthony? What would that mean for me as a person? I was recently diagnosed as borderline diabetic, so I'm learning all of the different things that I need to do, but what do you mean when you say that?
Changing your eating habits, you know, lifestyle change, eating healthier, and exercising. You know, everything is good in moderation. So we're not saying you can't eat this, you can't eat that. It's just that we live in a gluttonous society, so we overeat. You know, we oversaturate our foods with fats, with salts, with sauces and things like that, you know, and sugars. So when I say managing it, it means watching what you put into your body, making sure that it's the healthiest thing for you, especially if you're borderline. The FACE initiative has a great website that you can log into, and it's face-diabetes.com, face-diabetes.com, that you can go to and have all the answers to any question that you want to answer. And they've also teamed up with Ebony nutritional cookbooks to give you healthy alternatives to some of the foods that we love to eat. Now, they're not giving us substitutes, they're giving us healthier alternatives to it.
Why do you think it's so hard for African American men to take proper steps in treating diabetes? I mean, you know, did you have that challenge as an African American when you were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes?
No, that challenge wasn't there for me. The challenge, especially for men, is to get them to the hospital just to get a regular checkup. You know, some of these things can be detected early, so you can make the necessary changes in your diet and in your lifestyle to help you with this. So if we were to go get our annual or semi-annual checkups like we should, you know, we would be a lot better off. But as men, we're stubborn, and we don't do that. You know, it's unfortunate that we have to have events like National Take a Loved One to the Doctor Day, but we need to do that.
Thank you, Anthony.
Okay, Faith, thank you. All right, boo-boo. You just cut me short. It was like, it's over. I got what I need. I'm done with you. Throwing me to the street now.
Oh, I love that comedy.
We highlighted a number of theatrical events this past year. Don't Tell Me I Can't Fly, The Trip, and From My Hometown, to name a few. Our Everett Marshburn covered the Milwaukee's Rep production of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom.
A 1, a 2, You know what to do.
Rambling man makes no change in me.
These are scenes from My Rainey's Black Bottom, a new production of August Wilson's first Broadway hit that is currently at the Milwaukee Rep.
Ma Rainey is an actual historical character. She was called the Mother of the Blues, and she was very popular during the 1920s. She was kind of a pioneer. She paved the way for Bessie Smith and those who came after her.
Bessie Smith sang in Ma's backup band. So, but it deals with Ma Rainey and the music industry of that era and how it was changing, and the recording industry was becoming a big part of it. But her thing was on the circuit, so to speak. So it just deals with that kind of exploitation of the music of that time, and she really isn't the central character. It's more about one of her musicians, who is a young upstart kind of musician who wants to do his music. And so in a nutshell, it just deals with that aspect of the music industry in the blues era.
The play explores a range of issues: race, age, sex, and gender. The original Broadway production, starring Teresa Merritt and Charles S. Dutton, won numerous awards. It became the third play in Wilson's Pittsburgh cycle of 10 plays.
This one actually is the only one that doesn't take place in Pittsburgh. This one is in Chicago, but August was from Pittsburgh. And I think he didn't go into it thinking, oh, I'm gonna write 10 plays about Pittsburgh. And I think, but when he wrote, when he started writing them, I think the Hill District was a big part of his life. And so a lot of them take place in the Hill District. And if you go to Pittsburgh and you walk around the Hill District and you've seen one of his plays, you can hear the language. So I think, just knowing that someone is that close to his foundation, I think is a good thing. So I think from that aspect, again, I would say that there's no other playwright that I think could capture that much in their work, and he does that. And the Pittsburgh cycle is just, it's just a phenomenal thing that when you find, if you sat down and read each one of them, you'd get a history of life, and I think that's what makes it so important.
When August was writing, he would go to little diners and dives and just places and just listen to how people talked, and he'd write it down kind of verbatim, kind of what they said and how they said it. So it's just really regular kind of people and in everyday kind of situations and their struggles and their triumphs and those types of things, and it's just they're very human kind of stories. So it isn't just black people that relate to them.
The blues help you to get out of the bed in the morning. You get up knowing you ain't alone. There's something else out there in the world. Something's been added by that song. This be an empty world without the blues. I take that emptiness and try and fill it up with something.
You fill it up with something the folks can't be without, Ma. That's why they call you the mother of the blues. You fill up that emptiness in a way like ain't nobody ever thought of doing before. Now they can't be without it.
I ain't started the blues way of singing. The blues always been here.
August was a poet before he was a playwright, and so his language is very poetic and lyrical, and so it's a challenge, and it's also a joy to work on his work because there's a lot to deal with and a lot to handle, and it's fun trying to find all those different intricacies of the characters, which each character is very, very multi-leveled, and they're very spiritual as well.
I originated the role of Aunt Esther in his second to last play, Gem of the Ocean. So I've done Gem of the Ocean, of course. I did Joe Turner's Come and Gone at Penumbra Theater in where I'm from, Minneapolis. I've done Ma before. This is my third Ma Rainey. And I've also done Piano Lesson. So I'm trying to make my way through the canon.
This one for me it's the fourth time I've directed it. I did play the lead guy back when I was young enough to do that. And I also directed it So it's close to me because I met August at a time before the play came out, before he was a big name person. Charles Dutton was a friend of mine who played Levy on Broadway. And so during that time, to see what became of this man that I met who had just written this play, it has a special place for me because it was my first experience with him, and then I've had such a rich experience with this particular play. I've directed or acted in 18 productions of August's work. So, you know, it's this one it's the first one, so it makes me feel good to be back at it.
Even Adam in the garden taking a chance. Adam didn't take time to get his pants off. Hear me talking to you. I don't bite my tongue.
Beginning with Scott Walker's inauguration, 2011 was a news junkie delight. Here to sort out the important stories from that year and to look ahead to 2012 are freelance journalist Joanne Williams and Milwaukee Journal Sentinel editorial writer James Causey. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks. Joanne, was the Walker administration budget repair bill, the biggest news item of 2011?
It was in Wisconsin, and it made news all over the world, too. So many people gather in one place to object to one particular thing was just monumental.
But Joanne, did he give any hint that he would do that when he was running for office?
Not when he was running for office, but I've talked to some people who knew him when he was county executive, and they said they weren't surprised that he took that approach when he got to be governor.
Okay, Mr. Causey, what is your take on it?
I think it caught a lot of people off guard. It definitely caught the editorial board off guard. We did not expect changes to take place on such a wide scale. And, you know, it was the most talked about story everywhere. You could be in another state. People were talking about it. It was the most important issue that concerned everybody everywhere because they were thinking, what will my state do? What will my governor do?
But as Joanne stated, it fired a lot of people up, especially his attempt at union busting. Either one of y'all, talk about that.
Well, it's not a union busting bill. That's, the Republicans would say that's not what it was for. It was a budget repair bill so that the entities could then do better with their budgets.
But Joanne, I hate to cut you off, but anytime you take away someone's right to negotiate fairly,
right.
Is that not an attempt to break the union?
Well, as I was going to say, it wasn't spun that way. But that's what it ended up doing, and reducing the effect and the strength of the unions and their ability to negotiate. So I think not only is it going to change the way government approaches the unions, I think it's going to change the way the unions approach their employers. And I think it's going to have long, widespread ramifications, not just for public employees and public unions, but I bet it's going to start affecting private unions and private employers too.
Matter of fact, there's a group of machinists now that are on strike that are private, and I think their company is trying to do the same thing.
So it's changing a lot of our lives just because of that.
Mr. Causey, also there was a big issue with cutback of state funds. For an example, MPS almost lost $1 billion. Talk about that for me.
MPS lost a lot of tools, and you know, one of the things that Walker talked about was giving everyone the tools they needed to do their jobs. Well, you know, it was very hard for Supervisor Gregory Thornton to do his job of educating probably the poorest kids in the state. And when you have to educate kids with the most needs, you need more money to do that. And he lost a lot of those tools to do that. So it was very difficult for public schools and schools in rural areas to do their jobs. They had to make a lot of changes, a lot of cutbacks, a lot of teachers lost their jobs, and it was very tough times.
Ms. Williams, you also did a great piece on dropouts and then those that drop back in. How do you think this budget cut is going to affect those young people?
Well, who really knows? The ones who dropped out and the ones that we talked to are now in alternative schools because that's where they are being successful. But the students who are still in the standard MPS schools and the charter schools and the choice schools, they're going to feel the impact too, particularly the students in MPS traditional schools, because as the budgets get reduced, their services get reduced, and they're going to maybe not get the kind of care and concern that the students we saw in a package that I did talked about. That's what they need. They need people to care about them, not just teach them. And maybe budget cuts are going to cut back on that too.
What about the employment picture, Mr. Causey, here in the state?
Well, moving forward, we know that this is the 9th poorest city in the country, and unemployment levels for African American males are, you know, depending on who numbers you look at, it's between 35 and 50%. That's ridiculous.
It's 56% for Milwaukee.
56%. But think about this. This should be the #1 issue for every politician in this area. If they're not talking about jobs and creating jobs, then they need to find something else to do.
Let's go to something positive.
All right.
The Green Bay Packers. Ms. Williams.
Yes, sir. Green Bay Packers, Super Bowl champions, and they're going to repeat in 2012.
So you're just giving it to them?
Well, let's see, they were 10-0, 12-0, 13-0, on and on and on. I've watched every Packer game, and I don't see how anybody's going to beat them.
Okay. Mr. Causey, how do you feel about the Packers?
I think we're becoming spoiled on winning here. We had very successful teams. Not only the Packers, but the Brewers also did well. You know, the Badgers football team, the basketball team did well. We have a lot of riches right now in sports.
I got 2 more good questions, and all of my questions are good. 2 more questions in a limited amount of time. Let's talk about the death of photographer Harry Kemp.
Oh, that probably touched both of us personally.
Right.
Harry was a man who was out taking pictures for years and years. He was everywhere. I don't think anybody in the African American community or any other communities in Milwaukee didn't have an encounter with Harry Kemp. They may not have known his name, but they always saw him. As a matter of fact, when we went to the memorial service for his passing, and there was a photographer there, and I turned around out of the corner of my eye, I said, "Oh, there's Harry," and then I realized, no, it's not, and I won't see him with that camera around his neck again.
Mr. Causey.
I've known Harry all my journalistic career, my entire career, and he's always been there. And you know, one thing about Harry, not only did he take pictures, he knew your name, so he added that value to it too. It's one of the greatest losses for everyone in the state.
We also have a recall coming up in 2012, and it's also a presidential election year. What are your opinions about that, Joanne?
Well, we'll see what happens with that recall. We'll see how that goes. It's certainly going to get national attention, just as almost everything else in Wisconsin has in 2011. And then, of course, we have a presidential election in 2012. And in the state of Wisconsin, I don't know which is going to be get the most attention, the presidential election or the governor of the state.
Okay. I have 1 more minute, and I want to give each one of you 30 seconds.
Okay.
What are the other important things to look out for in 2012, Mr. Causey?
Well, I think you have to keep focusing on jobs. Infant mortality is also a huge issue here. You got to focus on that. But I think until the economy starts to really come back, we're going to continue to have the same problems that we're facing. Education is always a big issue as well. It's the same issues keep coming up year after year, so we have to keep coming back at those issues hard.
Ms. Williams?
And I'd like to say that there's something new that we haven't discussed. But I think James is right. Jobs, jobs, jobs. And that is a complicated issue, but it's something that we have to address. I run into somebody at least once a day who will say to me, "I'm out of work." And these aren't the people you expected. These are the people who were the CEOs, who had their own businesses, who were very successful. And they say, "I'm out of work and I don't know what to do." And it cuts across ages, from people right out of high school to people looking at their Medicare.
And that's, it does not discriminate.
It does not discriminate. We have to find jobs for the people of Wisconsin.
Mr. Causey, Ms. Williams, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you. Before we close tonight, we'd like to wish you and your family
A safe and prosperous 2012.
And that wraps up this edition of Black Nouveau.
Remember, in the coming week, do something to expand your world. Good night.
Good night, and thanks for watching.